Hi everyone, welcome to day one of our Spring Pastels Corner to Corner Baby Blanket Crochet Along. That's a lot of words, big mouthful, but I think you're going to enjoy it. And welcome, I'm glad you're here. I'm Chris Long and I'll be showing you in a matter of 4 different days of how to do corner to corner and how to make our beautiful pastel baby blanket. I first want to start out by saying that the yarn that I'm using is Bernat Softy Baby, which is what I mentioned in the pattern. This one is a number 3 weight yarn, and it is done in the colorway of Baby Baby. You can make this pattern in actually a number 4 weight if you want to. You could even make it in a bulky weight if you want to do some experimentation and use bigger yarn, larger crochet hooks. But my pattern to get the best results according to what I've done is to use a number 3 weight yarn and to use a G hook. And I'm using a G, which is actually a 4.0 millimeter. And I use a G hook for this because with this weight yarn, it helps to keep the little squares that we create in corner to corner, helps to keep them so they're a little closer together and it doesn't have quite as much open parts to it. So anyway, we have a G hook that's mentioned in the pattern, and we have our Softy Baby number 3 yarn. Now, we are going to work on this in 4 different episodes or different days, and according to the pattern information that I've given you the beginning part of the pattern. If you've purchased the pattern, you have the whole thing. But what I've given everyone is the beginning written directions for 40 rows of the pattern. So you should have that, and that's what we're going to try to accomplish in this particular day, and until you want to get that done so that when we get to day 2 that you are ready to go beyond row 40. Okay, so what we're going to do is start out. I'm going to set my skein aside here, and to start out, we're going to make our slip knot, and we're going to put that onto our hook. Now, when you start looking at your written directions and at your chart, which we'll talk about in a little bit, the beginning of corner to corner always starts in the lower right-hand corner of your blanket or of your project and of your chart and your written directions. And so we are starting with that first row 1, which is 1 square that we create. Those little groupings of 4 double crochets basically are little squares that we refer to. And you'll see that as we go along here right away. But to start out, I've got my yarn on my crochet hook with my slip knot, and I'm now going to do 6 chains. So we'll do 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Now, what you want to do is to count 1, 2, 3, 4, and in the 4th chain from the hook, do a double crochet. In the beginning, it's a little bit harder to hold everything, but once you get a little bit more fabric going here, it's not hard at all. In the next chain, we want to do another double crochet. And in the last chain, we want to do another double crochet. And what we've effectively done right now is create what we call in the corner to corner world is 1 square. And you'll see again how that kind of works out as we go. But it happened because of those first 3 chains that we skipped over, and then we made the last 3 double crochets. Now, that actually is row 1. So check that one off. You're already 1 row into the project. Now we want to start with row 2. And on your written directions, it'll say RS and WS, and that means right side, wrong side. That makes a bigger difference if we were making a picture or doing a lot of color changes and you'd want to make sure you were doing certain things on the back, certain things on the front. With our one type of yarn, we're not going to worry about that too much, but just be aware of what that means. In order to make our next row, we need to do 6 chains again. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And just like we did to start out, what you want to do is count 1, 2, 3, and in the 4th chain from the hook, make a double crochet. We need to get used to this because this is how it will work throughout the blanket. So again, in the next chain, you do a double crochet, and in the last chain, double crochet. Now, if there's ever going to be any confusion when you first start out, it's probably going to be right here. Because now remember, we've got our first square. You can tell that's the first square because it has the end of the yarn on it. And then we have the next square, which is actually the beginning of row 2. Now, in order to do the next part, you need to flip this bottom square so that the chains are facing toward the top. And then, see there's a space right there where the chains were. And in that space, not in a chain or not in a stitch, you want to do a slip stitch. And what you've effectively done is connected the first row to the beginning of the second row. Now we need to make our next square. So we're going to chain this time 3 chains. And in that space, we will always put our chains plus 3 double crochets. If you hear some background noise, my 15-year-old Sebastian, our black lab, is my assistant, and he's kind of shaking and sneezing and doing assorted things, so that's him. So now we have effectively made rows 1 and rows 2. Now we are at the end of a row, and whenever you're at the end of the row, you always have to do chain 6. So there's 3, 4, 5, 6. And as we mentioned, always we will count 1, 2, 3, 4, and in the 4th chain, we'll do a double crochet. Double crochet. Now, we have that square kind of hanging out there in space, and at the end we always have to turn our fabric and now find the space that was formed by the chains in that previous square, do our slip stitch, and now we have connected the square of the beginning of row 3 to the last square of row 2. Now we have a square here that's not on an end, it's right in the middle, so we will always do 3 chains on a square like that. But then again, 3 double crochets. 3 double crochets. Okay. And then we find our next square, find that space created by the chains, do a slip stitch, but this is not the end. We need to finish this square, the last square of row 3, so we do 1, 2, 3 chains and 3 double crochets. And now we've completed 3 rows of our blanket. Now, in order to tell how many rows you've done, just count 1, 2, 3. And you can tell that you have enough squares in the row because it should match the number of the row. So this is row 3. We should have 3 squares. If for some reason you don't, and sometimes people don't, especially here, because they thought they were done and then started doing the next row. But you have to remember to finish off that last square. So we'll start with row 4. And with this, we're on the end, so we need to do our 6 chains. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And whenever we have 6, we have to count back. 1, 2, 3, 4. And in the 4th chain, do our double crochet. Next chain, double crochet. And in the last one, double crochet. Now again, we have this square created for the beginning of our next row. Okay, so we've made that first square of row 4, but it's kind of hanging out there. So remember, we need to turn our fabric and find that chain opening and do our slip stitch. Now we have the beginning of row 4 connected, that first square connected to the last square of row 3. So now we have an inside square, and we do our 3 chains, and then we do our 3 double crochets in that same space created by those chains. There's square 2. Next, find the next square, find the opening from the chains, slip stitch. It's an inside square, so we only do 3 chains. So there's our 3 chains, and now 3 double crochets in that space. Okay, there's 3. And finally, we do our last square, find our space created by the chains, and do a slip stitch. Now remember, we're not finished with this row. Sometimes people think it is, but we have to finish off that last square. So we do 3 chains, and then we do our 3 double crochet in that space. So there we are. We've got 4 rows. We can count again, 1, 2, 3, 4. And we want to double check that we've got the right amount of squares in here in our row. And you can tell that because if it's row 4, we should have our 4 squares, 1, 2, 3, 4. Starting row 5. It's an outside square, so we do our chain 6 again. 5, 6, count back 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. And so then we want to go in and do our double crochet in the 4th stitch, double crochet in the next, and double crochet in the last. Sounds kind of the same, right? And it is. It's just a matter of repeating the same thing. You just put more squares in the middle, basically. So now, again, it's hanging out there in space. We need to turn our fabric and find our chain space in that last square from the previous row. Go in and do a slip stitch to connect that first square. And now this is a a square on the inside, an interior square. It's not on the edge. So it's only chain 3 and then 3 double crochets in that chain space. Now, if you think that I'm going a little too fast or you want to just stop, you can stop the video now and catch up if you've not quite kept up. Or you can go back to the beginning I encourage that. Always go back to the beginning, start again, stop it where you need to. But we're on row 5 right now, and we'll just keep going here. And so we'll find our next inside square, find that chain space, do a slip stitch, chain 3 because it's a square that's on the inside, it's not on the edge. And now we do our double crochets, we do our 3, and again, this becomes pretty easy. We're not doing any color changes or anything. We're depending on our colors because of our variegated yarn, but we don't have to think about any color changes. So once we get it down of how to make these squares and how to keep increasing, you can sit and watch television, talk to people. It's a really easy type of pattern to get going on. So next square is an inside square, so we find our space, slip stitch, 3 chains, and do our 3 double crochets. There's our square, and now we're going to do our last one. Find our space created by our chains, slip stitch, and remember we're not done yet. We have to finish off this last square. So 3 chains, it's the inside of that last square, so it's 3 chains and then 3 double crochets. 3 double crochets. Okay, and there we have 5 rows. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You can see those are 5 this way, and now we count to make sure we have enough squares to match our number of rows. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, and we're just going to keep doing that until we get to row 40, and you complete row 40. What I'm going to do is let you go on your own, and again, if you need to review and go back and replay certain parts of the video, please do that. And I think what I'll do is check in around row 20. Okay, I think you have it. So here we are at row 20. And at this point, your corner to corner baby blanket should look like this. 20 squares along the edges, like so, and 20 squares across the angle. So hopefully yours looks like this. I'd like you to go ahead and do the rest of the rows 21 through 40. And then we'll be set for day 2. And I'll also be checking in with you on FaceTime Live. So I think you're doing a great job. Hopefully you have gotten a lot of good productivity going on. And I'll see you in the next video. Bye-bye.